Captain Reynolds adjusts the altitude controls, his movements calm and practiced. The sky outside is clear, the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. First Officer Martinez sips his coffee, glancing at the flight log. "Everything's running smoothly," he remarks, leaning back in his seat. A sudden jolt shakes the aircraft, making the instrument panel flicker. Reynolds frowns, checking the engine readouts. "That's strange." Passengers in the cabin glance around, sensing the slight shift in turbulence. Martinez reaches for the radio. "Let's check in with air traffic control." Unbeknownst to them, a critical system failure is about to unfold. A loud beep pierces the cockpit, making both pilots straighten in their seats. "Hydraulic pressure dropping," Martinez says, scanning the controls. Reynolds flips a switch, trying to stabilize the system. "We need to divert." In the cabin, flight attendants reassure nervous passengers as the plane trembles. A second alarm blares, this time for an engine anomaly. Reynolds reaches for the radio. "Mayday. Mayday. This is Flight 226. We have an emergency." Martinez runs calculations on fuel and available landing sites, his hands shaking slightly. The plane lurches again, dropping suddenly before stabilizing. Outside, dark storm clouds loom ahead, adding another layer of danger. The plane tilts sharply to the left, making passengers gasp in fear. "We're losing altitude too fast," Martinez shouts over the alarms. Reynolds wrestles with the controls, trying to counter the sharp descent. In the cabin, oxygen masks drop as the pressure fluctuates dangerously. A child cries as their mother holds them close, whispering reassurances. The radio crackles with air traffic control responding, but the pilots barely hear it over the chaos. "Flaps unresponsive, landing gear status unknown," Martinez reports, his voice tense. Reynolds grips the yoke tighter, eyes locked on the instruments. "Brace for impact." The ground rushes toward them as they prepare for an emergency landing, hoping they can pull off the impossible. Captain Reynolds wipes sweat from his forehead, his fingers gripping the yoke tightly. "Engines 1 and 2 are failing," Martinez shouts, his voice strained. The instrument panel flickers, warning lights blinking in chaotic sequence. The plane trembles violently, forcing passengers to clutch their armrests. A loud bang erupts from the left wing, followed by a jolt that knocks a flight attendant off balance. Reynolds adjusts the flaps, hoping to slow their descent. "Come on, hold together." Smoke begins to fill the cockpit, stinging their eyes and making it harder to breathe. "We need to find somewhere to land. Now!" Martinez yells over the alarms. Through the dense clouds, a flat open field comes into view, a last chance for survival. The landing gear partially deploys, but it isn't enough to soften the crash. The plane slams into the earth, skidding at a dangerous angle. Overhead compartments burst open, sending luggage flying through the cabin. Passengers scream as the impact jolts them forward, seatbelts straining against the force. Martinez braces himself against the panel, his knuckles white. A section of the right wing snaps off, sending debris spiraling through the air. The aircraft slows, but not before the nose slams into a ditch, throwing everyone forward. Reynolds gasps for breath, his body pinned against the control panel. The deafening noise fades, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, the smell of burning fuel fills the air. Reynolds unbuckles his harness, his hands shaking as he forces open the cockpit door. "Get out! Now!" Martinez shouts as smoke thickens inside the cabin. Flight attendants rush to assist passengers, guiding them toward the emergency exits. The escape slides deploy unevenly, forcing some to jump onto the rough terrain below. A woman clutches her unconscious child, pleading for help as a crew member lifts them to safety. Reynolds and Martinez make one last sweep of the cabin, ensuring no one is left behind. Flames creep along the left wing, inching toward the ruptured fuel line. "Go, go, go!" A flight attendant urges as the last passengers evacuate. The pilots leap from the aircraft just as an explosion erupts, sending a shockwave across the field. Captain Reynolds watches the wreckage, the reality of the crash finally sinking in. Martinez sits on the ground, his hands shaking as paramedics check his vitals. Passengers sob, clutching each other as they process the near-death experience. Firefighters douse the remaining flames, steam rising into the cold evening air. A medic kneels beside an elderly man, carefully wrapping a makeshift bandage around his arm. Lisa, a flight attendant, comforts a crying child, whispering reassurances. A police officer approaches Reynolds. "Captain, we need your statement when you're ready." Martinez glances toward the horizon, whispering, "Wow, lucky to be alive." The night falls, but the memory of the crash will haunt them forever. A team of investigators moves carefully through the debris field, documenting the wreckage. One technician kneels beside the cockpit, retrieving the black box from its protective casing. "We need to analyze this immediately," she tells her colleague, dusting off the device. A crash expert examines the fractured wing, shaking his head. Catastrophic structural failure. Scattered luggage, torn seats, and shattered control panels paint a grim picture of the disaster. Firefighters continue to monitor the wreck for any remaining hot spots. The lead investigator flips through flight logs, noting the emergency calls made before impact. Weather conditions played a role, but there's something else here. One analyst murmurs. The truth behind the crash remains buried in data, waiting to be uncovered. Journalists crowd the room, cameras flashing as officials take their seats. The lead investigator clears his throat. "We have reviewed the black box recordings." Murmurs ripple through the audience, tension hanging thick in the air. A mother clutches a framed photo of her son, waiting for closure. Preliminary reports suggest an undetected mechanical failure in the left engine. A survivor watches from the back row, reliving the terror of the descent. An official adds, "The crew's quick response minimized casualties." Sobs break out among the families, relief and sorrow mingling in their eyes. Despite the explanations, for many, the trauma of Flight 226 will never truly fade.